The discovery. The emptiness of space had always been Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez's companion during her long shifts at Station Omega-7. Located beyond Neptune's orbit, the listening post floated in eternal darkness. Its massive arrays pointed toward the infinite cosmos. Maya had been monitoring deep space signals for 3 years, mostly hearing nothing but the whispers of dying stars and the static of cosmic radiation. But on this particular night something changed. A pattern emerged from the chaos. Not random, not natural, but deliberate and structured. Maya's fingers flew across her console, adjusting frequencies and amplifying the signal. The computer systems hummed to life, processing the incoming data with increasing urgency. This was no ordinary cosmic noise. This was a message, broadcast across the vastness of space with tremendous power. "Director Thompson, you need to see this immediately," Maya called through the communication system. Within minutes, the observation deck filled with personnel. Director Alan Thompson, a weathered scientist who had spent 40 years searching for signs of intelligent life, stood behind Maya's station. His eyes widened as he studied the data streams flowing across multiple screens. "Is this what I think it is?" Thompson whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of equipment. Maya nodded slowly. "First contact, sir. But there's something wrong. The signal structure suggests it's not meant for us. It's more like we're intercepting someone else's broadcast." The team worked through the night, their excitement gradually morphing into something darker as the translation algorithms began decoding the alien transmission. What started as humanity's greatest discovery was becoming its most terrifying revelation. The broadcast contained both audio and visual components, compressed in a format that took their best computers hours to decipher. When the first images finally rendered on the main screen, the room fell into stunned silence. The beings in the broadcast were hauntingly beautiful, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns. Their large eyes held an intelligence that transcended species, but those eyes were filled with absolute terror. These creatures, which the translation identified as the Kithara, were not greeting the universe. They were saying goodbye. The Kithara moved through what appeared to be a vast crystalline city, its spires reaching toward alien stars, but the city was burning. Strange spider-like machines crawled through the streets, systematically destroying everything they encountered. And behind these machines came the true horror, massive beings encased in biomechanical armor standing 3 meters tall, with multiple arms ending in various weapons that seemed grown rather than built. "My God," someone whispered in the darkness of the observation deck. The translation continued, and the Kithara's voices filled the room. Their language was melodic, even in desperation, and the computer rendered it in flat, emotionless English that somehow made their words even more heartbreaking. To any who received this message, the lead Kithara spoke, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with emotion. "Know that we were the Kithara. For 10,000 cycles, we built beauty. We created art that could make stars weep. We composed symphonies that resonated with the frequency of life itself. We harmed no one. We offered friendship to all we encountered." The scene shifted, showing the armored beings more clearly. They were grotesque in their perfection, their bodies a fusion of organic tissue and living metal. The translation identified them as the Ravagers, though that was merely the closest human concept to their actual name. They moved with terrible purpose, collecting Kithara civilians not to kill them quickly, but to process them slowly, extracting something from their bodies that made them writhe in agony. "The Ravagers came without warning," the Kithara continued. "They rejected our offers of peace, our gifts of technology, our pleas for mercy. They want only one thing, the essence of consciousness itself. They feed on the neural energy of sapient beings, and the more advanced the consciousness, the more exquisite their feast." Maya felt bile rise in her throat as she watched a Ravager catch a group of young Kithara. The children's bioluminescent patterns flared in panic before dimming forever. The Ravager's armor pulsed with new energy, and through the translation, they could hear its satisfaction, a sound like grinding metal and breaking glass. Director Thompson placed a steadying hand on Maya's shoulder, though his own hand trembled. "Keep recording everything. We need to understand what we're seeing." The broadcast continued for hours, showing the systematic destruction of Kithara civilization, but buried within the tragedy was crucial information. The Kithara, in their final act of defiance, had included data about the Ravagers, their technology, their methods, their weaknesses. It was a warning to the universe. a desperate attempt to arm others against the horror that had befallen them. They consume civilizations in a specific pattern, Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's xenobiologist, observed as she analyzed the data. They identify species with advanced consciousness, isolate their worlds, and then harvest them over several cycles to maximize the extraction of neural energy. "Look at this," interrupted Marcus Webb, the station's tactical analyst. He had been studying the star charts embedded in the Cathara's broadcast. "These markers show the Ravagers' previous conquest. Dozens of civilizations all following a path through the galaxy." His face paled as he traced the trajectory with his finger. "If this pattern continues, their next target would be the Orion Arm," Maya finished, her voice hollow. "Our spiral arm. Our neighborhood." The team extracted more data from the broadcast. The Ravagers traveled in massive bioships, living vessels that could heal themselves and adapt to threats. They had been harvesting consciousness for millennia, viewing other sapient species not as equals but as crops to be cultivated and consumed. They were patient, sometimes watching a civilization for centuries, waiting for its consciousness to reach peak complexity before beginning their harvest. But the Cathara had also discovered something crucial in their final moments. The Ravagers had never encountered significant resistance. Every species they had harvested had been peaceful, advanced in art and science but not in warfare. The Ravagers' tactics relied on overwhelming psychological warfare and the paralysis that came from facing such horrific predators. "They're bullies," Marcus said suddenly, studying the tactical data. "Cosmic bullies who've never been punched in the face." Director Thompson turned to face his team, his expression grave but determined. "How long before they could reach Earth, assuming they follow their pattern?" Dr. Chen ran the calculations 3 times, hoping for a different result. "Based on their rate of expansion and the timestamps in this broadcast, 18 to 24 months. Maybe less if they've already identified us as their next target." The observation deck fell silent again, but this silence was different. It was the silence before a storm. The moment when everything changes. Maya looked around the room and saw the same expression on every face. A mixture of fear and something else. Something harder and more dangerous. "We need to contact Earth immediately," Thompson said, his voice carrying new authority. "Full priority transmission to the United Nations Security Council and all major governments." "What do we tell them?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. Thompson's jaw clenched. "We tell them that humanity has 18 months to become something we've never been before. We tell them that monsters are real, and they're coming to harvest our minds. And we tell them that the Cathara's sacrifice won't be in vain." As Maya began preparing the transmission to Earth, she thought about what made humanity different from the peaceful Cathara. Humans had never been purely peaceful. They had fought wars over resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes just because they could. They had weapons that could split atoms and poisons that could destroy ecosystems. They were, in their own way, predators who had chosen civilization. The Ravagers thought they were apex predators, the ultimate harvesters of consciousness. But they had never met a species that had spent its entire evolution fighting itself and everything around it. They had never met a species that could be incredibly cruel and incredibly kind, often in the same moment. They had never met humanity. "Sir," Maya said as she finished preparing the transmission, "the Cathara's broadcast. It's still going. There's more data, technical specifications, biological information about the Ravagers." "Download everything," Thompson ordered. Every bit of data could save lives. As the massive data package prepared for transmission to Earth, the team continued watching the Cathara's final broadcast. The last Cathara to speak looked directly into the recording device, their bioluminescent patterns dim but steady. "To those who receive this message, know that consciousness is precious. Life that thinks and feels and creates is the greatest treasure in the universe. The Ravagers seek to steal this treasure, to consume the light of sapient thought. Do not let them. Do not go gently into their darkness. Fight. Fight with everything you have. Make them pay such a price for your consciousness that they choke on it." The broadcast ended, leaving only static and the cold silence of space. But in that silence, something had awakened in the humans watching. It was not fear, though fear was certainly present. It was rage, cold and purposeful. The kind of rage that had once driven humanity's ancestors to hunt mammoths with nothing but sharp sticks and determination. The preparation. The message from Station Omega-7 reached Earth in 12 hours. Within 24 hours, it had transformed human civilization. The United Nations convened an emergency session unlike any in history, with every nation participating virtually or in person. The footage of the Kythera's destruction played on screens around the world, carefully edited to protect viewers from the worst horrors while conveying the magnitude of the threat. President Jennifer Walsh of the United States stood before the assembly, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. For all of human history, we have fought among ourselves over land, resources, and beliefs. Today, that history ends. We face an enemy that sees us not as nations or races or religions, but as prey. They intend to harvest our consciousness, to feed on our thoughts and dreams. I say this to the Ravagers, should they monitor our communications. You have made a fatal error. You have united humanity. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Within 48 hours, every major military alliance dissolved and reformed as a single entity, the Terran Defense Coalition. Borders became meaningless overnight. Scientists who had competed for Nobel Prizes now shared their research freely. Corporations that had guarded trade secrets for decades opened their databases to the common cause. In Beijing, General Liu Zhang addressed the assembled military commanders of Earth. The Kythera were artists and philosophers. They built beauty and offered peace. We respect their memory, but we are not the Kythera. We are the species that weaponized atomic energy within years of discovering it. We are the species that turned biology into warfare. We are the species that has been preparing for this moment without knowing it for our entire existence. The transformation of human industry was swift and total. Car factories retooled to produce weapons. Shopping malls became training centers. The entire economic output of Earth shifted to a single purpose: survival through superior firepower. But humanity didn't just prepare weapons. They prepared psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Dr. James Nakamura, Earth's leading neuroscientist, made a crucial discovery while analyzing the Ravager data. They feed on consciousness through specific neural frequencies. But human consciousness is uniquely chaotic. We're the only species we know of that can hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously. We can love and hate the same thing. We can believe in peace while preparing for war. This cognitive dissonance might be poisonous to them. The idea sparked a new line of defense. Scientists began working on ways to weaponize human thought itself, to turn their chaotic, contradictory consciousness into a toxin that would make humans inedible to the Ravagers. Meanwhile, artists and musicians created works designed to overload Ravager sensory systems, turning humanity's creativity into a weapon. In Moscow, Admiral Svetlana Volkov unveiled Project Shadow Strike. The Ravagers have never faced guerrilla warfare. They overwhelm civilizations with psychological terror and superior technology. But humans invented asymmetric warfare. We wrote the book on fighting stronger enemies. Every human ship will be equipped with stealth technology. We will be ghosts in the void, striking and vanishing before they can respond. The months passed in a blur of activity. Children learned combat drills alongside mathematics. Grandmothers trained in weapon assembly. The entire species became a military force, but not a traditional one. Humans prepared for a kind of warfare the galaxy had never seen. Total war, without rules, without mercy, without the possibility of surrender. Captain Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, the Defiance, watching the fleet take shape around Earth. Thousands of ships, from massive battle cruisers to tiny one-person fighters, filled the space between Earth and Mars. But these were not the clean, beautiful ships of science fiction. They were ugly, brutal things designed for one purpose: killing. "Status report," Stone commanded. "All weapon systems operational." His weapons officer responded. "We have nuclear missiles, antimatter bombs, biological weapons, chemical weapons, and a few things the scientists won't even name." "Sir, some of these weapons violate every treaty humanity ever signed." Stone's expression didn't change. "The Ravagers didn't sign those treaties. They want to eat our minds. The rules of civilization apply to the civilized. These are monsters, and we will fight them as monsters must be fought." Deep in underground bunkers, humanity's greatest minds worked on understanding Ravager biology. The Kythera's data had included detailed scans of Ravager physiology, and what they found was both terrifying and encouraging. The Ravagers were incredibly resilient, their biomechanical bodies capable of surviving in almost any environment. But they had a weakness, their dependence on neural energy. Without regular feeding, they would begin to consume themselves. "We don't need to kill them all," explained Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the lead researcher on Project Starve. "We just need to deny them food long enough. Their own biology will do the rest. They're like vampires from our old myths, immortal and powerful, but ultimately parasitic." The plan that emerged was brilliant in its brutality. Humanity would not just defend Earth, they would poison the well. Every human would be implanted with a neural device that, upon death, would release a pulse of corrupted consciousness, a final thought so filled with rage and hatred that it would poison any ravager attempting to feed. Humans would become toxic to their predators, even in death. As the 18-month deadline approached, long-range sensors detected the Ravager fleet. They moved through space like a disease, their bioships pulsing with stolen life energy. The lead ship broadcast a message, translated by the computers that had decoded the Kithera's warning. "Species designated human, you have been selected for harvest. Your consciousness has reached optimal complexity. Surrender and your termination will be efficient. Resist and your suffering will be eternal. We are the Ravagers. We are inevitable." Admiral Zhang, now Supreme Commander of Terran Forces, broadcast humanity's response from the United Nations. Behind her stood representatives from every nation, every culture, every faith that humanity had ever produced. When she spoke for 8 billion souls. "Ravagers, this is humanity. We have seen what you did to the Kithara. We have studied your methods. We understand what you are. You are parasites that have never faced a species that evolved as predators. You have never faced a species that turned its entire planet into a weapon. You have never faced a species that would rather die free than live as food. Come and try to harvest us. We have prepared a feast you will never forget." The transmission ended with something the Ravagers had never encountered: laughter. 8 billion humans laughing in unison, a sound that carried across space like a promise of violence. In her ready room, Admiral Zhang studied the final preparations. Humanity had seeded the solar system with mines, turned asteroids into kinetic weapons, and prepared ambushes in the darkness between worlds. But more importantly, they had prepared themselves. Every human understood that this was not a war for territory or resources. This was a war for the right to exist as thinking beings. The Kithera were right about one thing, Zhang said to her staff. "Consciousness is the greatest treasure in the universe." But they were wrong about another. It's not just something to be protected. It's a weapon. And humanity has been sharpening that weapon for 200,000 years. As the Ravager fleet approached the outer solar system, they encountered something unprecedented. Instead of fleeing or cowering, human ships moved toward them. Small, fast vessels broadcast messages of defiance. Some played music, Wagner, heavy metal, war drums from 100 cultures. Others broadcast images, humans throughout history, fighting and dying for causes they believed in. The Ravagers had expected fear. They had expected pleas for mercy. They had never expected eagerness for battle. For the first time in their million-year history of harvesting consciousness, the Ravagers hesitated. Something was wrong. These creatures were not acting like prey. In the command center on Earth, Maya Rodriguez, now promoted to tactical coordinator, watched the Ravager fleet slow its approach. "They're confused," she reported. "Their formations are adjusting. They've never seen this before." Director Thompson, standing beside her, smiled grimly. "Good, let them wonder. Let them worry. For the first time in their existence, let them feel what their victims felt: uncertainty." The first engagement came at the edge of the solar system. A single Ravager scout ship, sent to probe human defenses, encountered a human patrol. The battle was brief but significant. The human ship, instead of trying to escape when damaged, rammed the Ravager vessel while broadcasting a single message: "From humanity, with fury." The explosion was visible from Earth's telescopes. But more important was what happened next. The Ravager ship's death scream, a psychic pulse of confusion and something that might have been fear, was detected by every human telepath. The parasites could be hurt. They could be killed. And perhaps they could be made to feel terror. As the main Ravager fleet approached, humanity made its final preparations. Children were moved to hidden bunkers. Those too old or sick to fight were given the choice: evacuation or a final stand. Most chose to stand. In hospitals around the world, terminally ill patients volunteered for Project Poison Pill, allowing themselves to be turned into consciousness bombs that would detonate when the Ravagers tried to feed. The space around Earth became a fortress of determination. Every satellite was weaponized. Every space station became a gun platform. The moon itself was turned into the largest weapon humanity had ever created, its mass drivers ready to launch city-sized rocks at any target. But perhaps the most powerful preparation was psychological. Humans had spent months studying the Kithra's broadcast, learning not just about the Ravagers but about the nature of consciousness itself. They had discovered something profound. Consciousness was not just awareness, it was will. And human will, chaotic and contradictory as it was, could be focused into something the universe had never seen. As the Ravager fleet entered the inner solar system, they sent another transmission. This time there was something different in their tone. Where before there had been absolute confidence, now there was something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or concern. Species human, your response is unprecedented. Explain your lack of fear. You have observed our capabilities. Resistance is illogical. Admiral Zhang personally delivered humanity's response. You want to understand us, parasites? We are the species that split the atom. We are the species that decoded our own DNA. We are the species that went to war with itself so many times we became experts at destruction. We are chaos incarnate, given form and purpose, and that purpose is now your extinction. You cannot defeat us, the Ravagers responded. We are eternal. We have consumed thousands of civilizations. You consumed artists and philosophers, Zhang replied. You consumed those who chose peace, but you've never consumed warriors who chose peace. There's a difference. The Kithara built beauty. We built beauty too. But we also built horrors. We created weapons that could end worlds, then decided not to use them on each other. That restraint is gone now. You will face humanity unrestrained. The final message from Earth to the Ravager fleet was not words but images. Every war humanity had ever fought, every weapon they had ever created, every time they had chosen violence when peace was possible. It was a confession and a warning. Humans were not good. They were not pure. They were violent, chaotic creatures who had barely managed to achieve civilization, and now that civilization was just a mask they were ready to discard. The message ended with a simple text. The Kithara were right. Consciousness is precious, but you were wrong to think you were its only predators. Welcome to the food chain. As the Ravager fleet crossed into Earth's defensive perimeter, every human on the planet and in space spoke in unison. A message broadcast on every frequency, in every language humanity had ever spoken. From the ashes of the Kithara we rise. From the graves of the peaceful we emerge. We are humanity. We are fury. And we are hungry for justice. The battle was about to begin, but in a sense it was already over. The Ravagers had expected to harvest sheep. Instead, they had awakened wolves. 8 billion wolves armed with nuclear teeth and antimatter claws, united in purpose for the first time in their species' history. The parasites had finally found a species that would not just resist being consumed. They had found a species that would consume them in return. The harvest was about to begin, but this time, the Ravagers would be the crop.